After bidding farewell to Wiz, Virginie tore open the barrier leading to the underworld alone. Although she didn't know why the legendary superhero would be resurrected every 1,000 years, it didn't matter, did it? If you can be resurrected, I can force you to fall into reincarnation again. As an angel, Virginie has a perverted hobby for this kind of thing. Well, I remember it should be in the Milky Way star region, so let's go directly to the Milky Way star region. In a space, Virginie directly escaped into the subspace and headed towards the Milky Way. After 15 days, Virginie finally entered the Milky Way. In the center of the southern galaxy, on a desolate planet, this planet was where Broly and Bojack and his crew had fought before. This is where the Divine Seal last appeared and disappeared. However, this planet was not destroyed. It seems that this Saiyan has not recovered yet. Virginie knew that tens of thousands of years ago, this Saiyan had exploded and killed one of their angels at the limit of destruction. Although the possibility of a full recovery was not high, what if? Damn it, I can't sense it. Could it be that the Divine Seal has been cleared? Forget it. Let me ask the administrator of this star field first. The next moment, Virginie directly tore through the barrier of the underworld and stepped into the South King Kai's planet. However, the 4 King Kais were all on the Great King Kai's planet recently, so Virginie did not see the South King Kai. But even if she saw him, she was afraid that the South King Kai would not know who he was. Just after Virginie entered the Milky Way, on a planet in the center of the Milky Way, Broly, who was recovering his strength, suddenly opened his eyes. Is it here? It's coming a little slower than usual this time, Broly muttered to himself, but his eyes became sharp. If Baracus was nearby, he would know that Broly was about to kill. Virginie did not go to Grand King Kai's planet, but went directly to the human world. If she had gone there, perhaps Grand King Kai would not have to work so hard to communicate with the divine world. Returning to the human world once again, Virginie went directly to the life planet where the original galactic government was located. He remembered that the galactic government was a human force supported by the underworld, so he wanted to inquire about the situation. He once again escaped into the subspace, flying at high speed, but suddenly a huge force tore apart the subspace channel where he was, pulling him from the subspace into reality. Virginie, who? Virginie was shocked. You know, the one who could pull him out of the subspace must be at least in the late stage of destruction, because only in the late stage of destruction can one sense the subspace. If it was a strong man in the late stage of destruction, he would have been a threat to him, but that shouldn't be the case. Even if it was that Saiyan, once he broke through to the realm of destruction, he would be discovered by him. It has only been a dozen days, but he could have reached the late stage of destruction. Virginie fell onto a desolate planet, and when he saw the other person's face clearly, his heart suddenly started beating. How is it possible that you can remain sane and have reached the peak of the late stage of destruction? With grass-green hair, violent aura constantly emerging from his body, and lightning wrapped around him, who else could it be but Broly? Broly, it's been a long time, Virginie. The last time we met was over 1,400 years ago, right? Feeling Broly's naked murderous intent, Virginie felt a little panicked but quickly recovered. Virginie, I didn't expect that you, a bug, would regain your sanity, but do you really dare to unleash your full power? Before I came here, I went to the destroyer god realm of this universe and met Wiz. I believe you also know how powerful Wiz is. Broly, really? Do you think Wiz can detect me? Broly naturally knew how powerful Wiz was. Even at his peak, he was no match for her. But it was different now. His realm had already broken through to the realm of true God. What he lacked now was only the accumulation of strength and the polishing of his body. In terms of dimension, Wiz was not much higher than him. Moreover, before taking action, Broly had already set up a barrier and fought inside it. He was not afraid of being discovered by people outside, otherwise he would not have chosen to take action at this time. Virginie sensed the situation around him and his face turned pale, because with his ability he couldn't transmit any information at all. It was obvious that the Saiyan in front of him had already set up a barrier in advance. Although their angel clan is naturally powerful, they are still relatively inferior to the Saiyan clan, who are famous for their fighting power. The man in front of him is of royal blood among the Saiyans, and his fighting power cannot be judged by common sense. Although Broly's current combat power is only at the peak of the late destruction stage, about 90 billion, but in a real battle, Virginie's combat power of 120 billion will definitely not be his opponent. If he had known earlier, he should have practiced hard. At this time, Virginie felt a little regretful. Virginie, you'd better think it over. Do you think you can fight against the entire angel race by yourself? I advise you not to make a mistake. Although Virginie acted sternly, he was actually in a panic on the inside. He knew that with the hatred between the angels and the Saiyans, the other party would never let him go. Broly, ha ha ha, I didn't expect you would get scared one day. Unfortunately, we are destined to be enemies and you are destined to be my prey. Are you ready? Virginie was at the peak of his destructive power, and when he knew that his enemy would not let him go, he had no choice but to fight to the death. His aura began to release, and although it was not as violent as Broly's, it was still very powerful. Kill! Broly dodged and punched Virginie directly, and the two soon started fighting. After only one round, both of them retreated dozens of meters each. In terms of combat power, Broly was still a little inferior to Virginie, But that didn't mean Virginie had the advantage. On the contrary, Virginie was not completely unbelievable. You have to know that neither of them used any tricks just now. They were purely competing in fighting power, but after one attack, Virginie could only fight on equal terms with the opponent. It should not be said that he was weaker. At this moment, Virginie knew that if he didn't use some tricks, he would probably die here. Broly laughed crazily. His laughter was full of arrogance, but also a little sad. This man in front of him had been forced to lose his mind and reincarnate again after breaking through to the destruction realm in every previous life. For an angel who had just reached the peak of destruction, it took him until this life to recover himself. The violent energy continued to emanate from Broly's body. Virginie, if you want to kill me, it depends on whether you have the ability to do so. In ancient times, our clan was able to suppress you. Now, you can only hide in our shadow. Broly, humph, that has nothing to do with you. Now, I just want to beat you to death. After saying that, Broly launched his attack with a violent aura that frightened Virginie, and the two of them kept intertwining with each other and then separating. Facing Broly, who was getting more and more powerful as the battle went on, although Vigilius kept trying to fight back, he could not find any chance at all. No, if this goes on, he will kill me. Damn it, is there no limit to his power? Once again, Virgil began to get angry, burning his own essence and launching a counterattack against Broly. God's judgment. A spear made of pure energy stabbed towards Broly's head. Humph, you dare to call yourselves gods? Broly filled his hands with energy and directly grasped the spear of judgment. Then he squeezed it with all his strength, and the spear of judgment turned into light particles and dissipated in the air. How is this possible? This is my ultimate move. Broly, ha ha ha, I can sense your fear. Are you afraid? But it's no use. Virginie, no, you monster. Devil, why is this happening? Broly attacked again, still violently rampaging. Virginie had no choice but to fight back, but was clearly at a disadvantage. Soon, Virginie could no longer maintain his angelic nobility, and his body was covered with purple blood. Ha ha ha, that won't do. In that case, I'll just send you off. Broly punched out with such force and speed that Virginie had no time to react before her heart was pierced. Looking at the big hole in her heart, and then at the angel's heart in Broly's hand, Virginie felt that all her strength was rapidly dissipating. No, it shouldn't be like this. Having lost the angel's heart, Virginie knew that he had lost his last chance. If he had the determination of those angels back then and had directly self-destructed, perhaps Broly could have been allowed to return to reincarnation, but it was too late. Broly, ha ha ha, do you really think I only have the combat power of the late stage of destruction? I just want to paralyze you. It turns out that as early as 5 days ago, Broly had already recovered to the peak combat power of 128 billion, but in order to prevent the opponent from self-destructing, he only displayed a combat power that was infinitely close to the peak of 90 billion. Just in a moment, Broly suddenly exploded, pierced the opponent's heart in one fell swoop, and took away the opponent's angel heart. You are despicable. Having lost the heart of an angel, he no longer had the chance to be resurrected. Moreover, after they died, they did not enter the underworld, but were truly dead. With reluctance, Virginie slowly closed his eyes. Having lost his angelic heart, his body gradually dissipated and turned into a rain of light, ending his life. Broly, with this angel's heart, my strength should be able to recover faster. The heart of an angel is the energy core of the angel clan. The strength of the angel clan is linked to the heart of the messenger of heaven. If a mortal obtains an angel's heart and slowly absorbs the energy in it, not only can he improve his physical condition, but also the speed of cultivation can at least increase several times. It's a pity that it's only a destructive level angel's heart. Never mind, I don't mind having this little bit of energy. I'll give it to them as a gift. Broly remembered Kakarot, who was beside him when he was born in this life, and smiled evilly. Kakarot was extraordinary because he could cry loudly under the influence of his royal blood. You know, the other Saiyan kids who were with him at that time were so scared that they were not moved at all. It was such a bad memory. The crying at that time made me, a person of royal blood, feel upset. But I heard that these little brats have established a magic and martial arts empire, and it seems that they have grown well. At least the Galaxy Saiyan lineage has retained the fire. Broly arranged the battlefield. Although he had successfully killed his enemy of nearly 100 generations, who knew what tricks the gods had up their sleeves? After carefully confirming that no traces were left, Broly left this desolate planet. Before this, Baracus had been sent to the Magic Empire by Broly. After the previous Bojack incident, Baracus's ambitions were completely shattered. For fear of attracting the attention of the gods, Broly did not go to the demonic empire, but waited for the arrival of the gods. It was not until today that this hidden danger was eliminated. Broly did not use a spaceship or anything like that, but directly escaped into the subspace and headed in the direction he sensed. Those who can reach the realm of destruction basically have the ability to survive in space, because after entering the realm of destruction, the body can directly absorb free energy from space to sustain its own consumption. After reaching the late stage of destruction, one is no longer limited to using transportation within the spaceship, because one can easily sense the existence of the subspace, and can even teleport over short distances, which is much stronger than a spaceship. Of course, what is being talked about here is the realm, not the combat power. It is just the combat power that has been reached. Just like Vegeta and others can reach the combat power of the middle stage of destruction through transformation, but they cannot sense it without the support of the realm. Nothing is absolute. Some races can achieve space folding and teleportation by mastering some special techniques, such as the Atla people. However, this requires people with extremely high spatial talent. Even among the Atla people, only a very few people can learn it. Broly escaped into the subspace and moved towards the demonic empire where Vegeta was. Suddenly, Broly sensed that on a planet not far away there was a breath of Saiyans, but it seemed to be sealed. Although it was very weak, it existed. Broly escaped from the subspace directly, returned to the real world, and sensed another one. Yes, that's the planet. Soon Broly arrived on the planet. There were towering stone pillars everywhere and the ground was extremely rugged. It was obvious that a fierce battle had taken place on this planet, but no one knew who the two sides of the war were. Broly sensed it slightly. There were not many lives on this planet, but its combat power was considered good in the universe. The reactions of several other combat forces had actually reached the starfield level. Although it was only in the early stages, compared to most planets in the universe that had a combat power of only a few hundred at most, the planet Wu Ning was much stronger. The people of this planet naturally didn't know about Broly's arrival. After all, the dimension difference was too big. On top of a towering stone pillar on this planet, it's actually a bit of an exaggeration to call it a stone pillar. It just looked like a towering stone pillar from a distance. The diameter of the light is more than tens of kilometers. If it weren't for the fact that the whole thing is shaped like a cylinder, it would not be an exaggeration to say that it is a mountain. The strange thing is that around this stone structure, there are 8 stone pillars about twice as small. At this moment, on the top of the largest and tallest stone pillar, 9 aliens in strange costumes were discussing something. At this moment, Broly suddenly appeared out of nowhere without any summons, startling the 9 people present. Although Broly restrained his aura, these 9 people were also knowledgeable and powerful, and they felt a strong sense of danger from Broly. Who are you? He is Supa, the leader of the planet Yadetra, and also the strongest being on this planet. His combat power has reached the peak of the early stage of the starfield, with a combat power of 48 W. Broly, it doesn't matter who I am. What about the war you just mentioned thousands of years ago? And what about the sealed science? Supa, outsider, although I don't know who you are, if you want to harm our clan's benefactor, I advise you to give up this idea. Broly, benefactor? A Saiyan? I don't know how he's kind to you, but I think you got one thing wrong. You have no ability to resist at all. Then Broly released some of his aura slightly, and the entire stone pillar suddenly shook. The 9 Supa men felt as if they were facing a great enemy, as if they were being stared at by some top predator. Cold sweat broke out on their foreheads, which had long been immune to cold and heat. Unmatched, what kind of power is this? Just a slight leak of breath makes the whole planet tremble, but will the tragedy of 1,000 years ago be repeated? At this time, the humans on the entire planet looked towards the holy peak, where the breath just came from. After a while, hundreds of people gathered on the holy peak under pressure. Although the strongest combat power was only 4-star planetary level, it would be considered good in the universe, but it was not enough in front of Broly. Master Chief, what happened? Broly looked at these people with some admiration, for they dared to come and defend their homeland even though they knew they were no match for them. Broly, not bad, very good. Broly restrained his breath, and the entire planet slowly calmed down. On the other side of the planet, in an extremely deep seabed, if someone could dive down here, they would find a complicated sealing array. Inside the seal, a man with a tail was struggling in pain. Yatra is a planet about 20 times the size of the original Earth, with a gravity equivalent to about 5 standard gravity. 88% of the planet is ocean, and the deepest part of the ocean reaches a terrifying 89,000 meters. The seal is set here. It is so deep that even a star-level strongman cannot withstand the pressure of the seawater. Although the people of Yadetra want to rescue the human who once saved them, they have been powerless. On the top of the holy peak, Supa drove away the tribesmen who came to support him. Judging from the situation just now, the man in front of him was obviously not a strongman sent from the underworld. Supa, respected strongman, I am Supa, the leader of this planet. Please forgive our rudeness. Because the seal there is loose, we thought you were sent from the underworld by those kings to reinforce the seal. Broly, gods, those gods again? Damn it. By the way, Supa, what about the war you just mentioned 1,000 years ago? Supa felt that Broly seemed to be hostile to the underworld, so he slowly told the story of what happened 1,000 years ago. It turns out that more than 2,000 years ago, their planet was not what it is today, but was very prosperous. There were also gods on the planet at that time. With the development of Yadetra, the people of Yadetra gradually gained powerful strength. The gods were afraid that the power of Yadetra would affect the rule of theocracy, so nearly 1,000 years ago, the gods used their divine power to summon meteorites floating in the starry sky, and a disaster ensued. At this time, a man with golden flames all over his body happened to enter the planet in a spaceship. In the end, He used his powerful strength to resolve the crisis and killed the god of the planet. However, after this disaster, the Yadra people were left with only one member, so they regarded this suddenly appearing man as their savior. Not long after that, this man was besieged by powerful men from the underworld in the universe. Although the powerful men from the underworld were no match for this man, and many of them were killed in the end, for some unknown reason, this man actually gave up resisting and was finally sealed by the powerful men from the underworld in the deepest ocean trench on the star Yadra. On the planet Adetra, because they recognized this man, and because of the accusations of the gods who entered the underworld after their death, the powerful people in the underworld vented their hatred for their dead companions directly on Adetra. If the entire planet had not been afraid that the man would reappear in the world after its destruction, it would probably have been destroyed. After this time, the planet Yadetra was no longer suitable for human survival, and only a few strong ones barely survived. After nearly 1,000 years of development, the Yadetra people who can still survive are basically strong ones, with at least nearly 500 combat power. Although the strong men of Yadetra wanted to go deep into the seabed to remove the seal, the sea was more than 80,000 meters deep, and even their strongest Supa could not dive into it. What's more, the seal was not something they could break. It was said that it contained the sealing power of the great king of the underworld. After listening to this, Broly thought that 1,000 years ago, that should have happened after he was forced to reincarnate in the previous life. Although he didn't know which tribe member it was, but to be able to attract the attention of the underworld, he must have at least a destructive level combat power. Broly, the sealed place is at the other end, right? I just sensed the breath of a tribe member in that direction. I didn't expect that besides me there was someone who could break through to the destruction level 1,000 years ago. Let me go and take a look. Supa, tribe members, respected strong man, are you saying that the sealed adult is from the same race as you? Maybe because of his grass-green hair, Supa and others didn't know that the strong man in front of them was also a Saiyan. At this time, Broly revealed the Saiyan's iconic tale. Supa, I didn't expect that he is from the same tribe as that adult. No wonder he is so powerful. It's great, Broly. Okay, I'll go check it out now. After saying that, Broly tore through space and reappeared on the other side of the planet. Supa and the others were shocked. How powerful. You know, even they could only teleport by relying on their own spatial talent and secret techniques, but they couldn't tear the space and travel directly like Broly. Broly was hovering above the sea, carefully sensing the situation deep under the sea. Of course, he couldn't believe what Supa and the others said based on their one-sided statement. It is indeed the blood of the Saiyans, and it has evolved to a very high level, but it seems that the situation is a little bad. Could it be that the 1,000-year seal has exhausted the opponent's vitality? Broly set up a protective shield around him and then dived directly into the depths of the sea. Although the depth was more than 80,000 meters for him now, it was no different from being on the mainland. The deep sea is often full of dangers, and some deep-sea creatures are extremely terrifying. Broly's energy shield emits a charming halo, and deep-sea monsters will come from time to time. The strongest one has a combat power close to the middle and late stage of the starfield. Of course, for Broly it is not a crisis at all. After Broly releases a little breath, they instinctively flee away. Soon, Broly sneaked into the sealed area, looked at the complicated patterns in front of him, and felt the breath on it, the energy at the peak of the early stage of destruction, the breath of the World Core clan. It is basically certain that it is indeed a seal from the gods, but for Broly, this power is not enough. After about 10 minutes, Broly finally broke the seal completely, and a figure slowly appeared. Naked, with a tail wrapped around his waist and a cross-shaped scar on his face that added a bit of charm. Ha ha ha, God clan, I hope you will keep your promise, otherwise I will bury the entire underworld with you. Although the man had been sealed for 1,000 years, he did not seem to care about his injuries. After 1,000 years of sealing, and the high-intensity oppression of the deep sea, his body had long been strong beyond human strength. Although the energy in his body felt only like that of a mid-stage emperor, he was confident that once he got out, he could easily deal with that group of people with his physical body alone. Suddenly the man opened his eyes and looked at Broly. You are a Saiyan? I didn't expect there to be another Super Saiyan among the Saiyans. Good, good, good. Broly, who are you? The man replied. Bardock. Yes, the Saiyan in front of him was the Bardock who fought against Frieza alone, was sucked into the time tunnel and returned to 1,000 years ago. Broly, you are very strong. Even your physical body is not much weaker than mine. Bardock, did you break the seal outside? What era is it now? Is our planet Vegeta, still there? Broly, planet Vegeta? It was destroyed by Frieza more than 30 years ago. Bardock, really? It seems like it can't be changed. How many Saiyans are there now? Broly, I don't know. If you have anything to say, let's go up first. Broly and Bardock floated to the surface of the sea and soon returned to land. On Grand King Kai's planet, when Broly broke the seal, Grand King Kai, who was trying to communicate with the God Realm, immediately knew about it. Oh no, who broke the seal back then? Could it be that the demonic Martial Empire has already started to attack the South Galaxy? After a long period of fruitless communication, the Great King knew that something must have happened in the God Realm, and now he could only find a solution on his own. Using the authority of the King Kai, the great King Kai began to explore the sealed area of the planet Yadetra. However, the seal had been broken, and the people sealed inside had long since disappeared. However, no trace of the demonic empire was found. Am I overthinking? He broke through the seal by himself. No, the seal was broken from the outside, but by whom? The great king explored the entire planet of Yadetra, but except for Supa and a few others, he did not find any life reactions with strong combat power. And these Yadetra people, with their limited combat power, were simply unable to break the seal. Broly and Bardock certainly haven't left yet, but Broly's current dimension is much higher than that of the great King Kai, so it's naturally not something he can discover whenever he wants. After several fruitless searches, the great king could only withdraw his gaze. Anyway, too many bad things had happened recently, and as long as that place wasn't discovered, they believed that nothing big would happen. Moreover, since they sent strong men from the underworld to the mortal world last time, they didn't dare to send anyone down there again, because they couldn't win. However, what King Daikai didn't know was that during the time he was communicating with the divine world, many extremely powerful beings appeared in the human world. On top of a mountain on the planet Yadetra, Bardock and Broly stood facing each other, talking about some past events. Broly never thought that Bardock would have such an experience. In the battle with Frieza, he was caught in a time tunnel and survived. Later, he continued to break through the limits, broke the seal of the gods, and successfully transformed into a Super Saiyan. Bardock also didn't expect that the Saiyan in front of him, who was definitely not weaker than him, was actually a legendary existence. Because of Bardock, Broly's original plan to go to the Demon Empire was delayed, but Broly felt it was worth it to see another super strong Saiyan appear. Broly, Uncle Bardock, aren't you going to meet the people on this planet? Bardock, no, old man. You are a legendary figure. How can you call me uncle? As for the people on this planet, forget it. I just helped them on a whim. Besides, their fighting power won't be of much help to us in the future. Broly, after nearly 100 reincarnations, I have long since given up my previous identity. And according to you, you are now over 1,000 years old, so it's not too much to call you uncle. Bardock, let's talk about friendship as equals. We are in this situation now, so what's there to be upset about? Broly, okay, let's treat each other as equals. Don't always call me ancestor. By the way, what is your current strength? Bardock, although I've been sealed for 1,000 years, my strength is only 1/100th of what it once was, but I should still be able to exert a combat power of about 500 million. However, if I add my physical strength, I can even fight against an opponent of billion. Broly thought about it and took out an object from his hand. If it wasn't the angel's heart, what else could it be? Bardock, such pure energy. This energy is probably even more powerful than my Super Saiyan 2 energy. Broly, of course this is the angel's heart of the God clan at the peak of destruction. By the way, the peak of destruction is roughly equivalent to Super Saiyan 2. Hiss, Bardock took a breath of cold air. He didn't expect that Broly could even hunt down this kind of god. You have to know that 1,000 years ago he had just broken through the peak of the early stage of Super Saiyan 2. Of course he must be stronger now. If he has enough energy, Bardock believes that he can definitely improve it by about 20 times based on Super Saiyan 2. Broly casually threw the angel's heart to Bardock and said, I originally intended to give it to your son as a gift, but now I realize that you need it more than they do. I have a feeling that there will be a big battle soon, and you must recover your fighting power as soon as possible. Bardock was touched. Broly was so impressive that he could give such a big gift to Broly after just meeting him. Bardock said, what about you? I remember you said that you have reached the level of a true god now. As long as you have enough energy, you can quickly increase your combat power? Broly, it's not that easy to obtain true god level energy. This amount of energy is totally insufficient. Besides, with my bloodline, it's easier to improve than yours. Bardock, well, I won't be so hypocritical. Broly, ha 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 ha, that's right, this is what we Saiyans are like. Bardock smiled, and the two found a place, and then Bardock began to absorb and refine the energy of the angel's heart. The energy of the angel's heart was extremely pure. As Bardock extracted it, an enchanting halo emanated from the surface of the angel's heart. Bardock's long-dried body absorbed it like a sponge. Feeling the joy of the cells in his body, the hidden dangers left by the 1,000-year seal were slowly eliminated under the flushing of this pure energy. Just like this, after 10 days, the angel's heart had actually become a lot smaller, and Bardock seemed to have been reborn. Broly also felt the change in Bardock at this time, and sensed Bardock's condition, which was very good. Bardock, that's enough. I feel like it would be a waste to absorb anymore. Now I have completely integrated the power of Super Saiyan 1 into my normal state. If I encounter those strong men from the underworld again, I won't be threatened by them. Broly, you can integrate the power of Super Saiyan 1 into your normal state? Awesome. I think your current combat power should be around 15 billion, which is much stronger than Super Saiyan 1. Bardock, that's because after 1,000 years of deep sea oppression, my body is too strong. And I feel that even if I become a Super Saiyan now, my combat power will not increase much unless I transform even more powerfully. Broly, yes, your current state should have reached the limit of destruction. What you lack is energy recovery. Bardock, that's enough, let's GGO. The holy world of demon and martial arts has returned to peace again since the last trip to Namek. Sun Tian has not been in seclusion recently, and has been often instructing Qi Tian and Wu Tian in their training. The addition of Namek has made the demonic martial arts empire even more powerful. There are nearly 10 strong men with combat power of over 10 billion. Sun Tian's fighting power has long been a mystery, but everyone knows that even if the great elders of Namek, Pixar and Vegeta join forces, they are no match for him. It is said that Sun Tian has entered a whole new realm. On this day, Sun Tian was at home playing with his wife Chi-Chi and Goten. After so many years of practice, Chi-Chi had already broken through the boundaries of Earthlings, and with Sun Tian's frequent guidance, she is now a powerful warrior with a combat power of over 1 million, a total of 1.8 million. Suddenly, Sun Tian felt two powerful auras approaching the demonic martial saint star quickly, although the combat power of one of them was not very good, but the realm was not much different from his. Of course, the combat power here is not very good only compared with him. If compared with others, even the great elder Qi Tian would be much weaker. The key is that these two auras can actually bypass the technological surveillance of the demonic martial empire, and even Begoxing, an intelligent technological life, did not notice them. At this time, Qi Tian also rushed back. It was obvious that no one in the entire Mowu Empire noticed the arrival of these two auras except them, father and son. Qi Tian, father, these two energies seem to be from Saiyans. Although one of them is violent, it gives me an inexplicable feeling. Sun Tian, yes, it's a Saiyan, and a very strong Saiyan. I'm afraid that apart from you, even the great elder of our empire is no match for him. Yes, what Sun Tian and the others sensed were Broly, who had wanted to go to the demonic empire before, and Bardock, who was later rescued by Broly. Who can help me come up with a name for the Namekian Grand Elder? It feels weird to always write him as Grand Elder. Sun Kishin, now 17 years old, has grown up completely, about 2 meters tall. Standing next to Sun Tian, the 3-year-old Goten saw Kishin and was not shy and just hung on Kidian. Don't look at Goten's small age. You should know that when Goten was born he had a combat power of 10,000 points. Now the 3-year-old Goten has reached a combat power of more than 1.5 million, although he has not learned to transform yet. Can you imagine what a 3-year-old with a combat power of 1.5 million means? Wu Qian, brother, what's wrong with you? Qi Tian, be good, there may be guests coming soon, go to your mother first. Goten, guest? Is it Uncle Vegeta? Oh great, I can play with Phileas again. Because of Goten, Vegeta married Bulma many years earlier, so Trunks is now 11 years old, and Vegeta's third son Phileas is only 4 years older than Goten, so Goten and him can just play together. However, Phileas was not willing to play with Goten, because the two of them would often spar with each other while playing levels, and although Phileas had been trained by Vegeta since childhood compared with Goten, his natural combat power was much worse, and now his combat power is only about 300,000. Fortunately, Goten was sensible at an early age and would not really hurt them. However, being able to reach a combat power of 300,000 at the age of 7 is much stronger than Vegeta and others of the same period. Qi Tian, no, you will know in a moment. Sun Tian, here we are. Qi Tian, keep an eye on your brother and mother. Before knowing the purpose of these two auras, Sun Tian still had to be on guard. He had to know that they were not like the Kira before, but super strong ones with combat power exceeding 100 billion. Above the holy land of demonic martial arts, a vortex similar to a black hole suddenly appeared in the sky. Two figures walked out of the vortex, and then the vortex slowly disappeared. Sun Tian cast his gaze towards the two figures and was greatly surprised, mainly because it was too beyond his expectations. The two people who came were indeed Saiyans, and they were two very familiar figures in Sun Tian's memories of his previous life. Qi Tian also saw the faces of the visitors clearly and was shocked. One of them looked exactly like his father. If it weren't for the cross scar on his face and the different aura, Qi Tian would have thought that this was his father if he met him somewhere else. Although he didn't recognize the other figure, the faint aura showed that his fighting ability was at least comparable to his own. The two of them slowly landed on the ground and looked at Sun Tian and his group in front of them. Broly Kakarot, I'm glad to see you again. Sun Tian, you are Broly? Broly, oh, it seems like you know me. Sun Tian, of course, the legendary Super Saiyan, the strongest warrior in the universe that only appears once every 1,000 years. I wonder why you came to my demonic empire? I know it too damn well. In his previous life, Sun Tian could be said to be a super fan of Broly. He often sighed at the unfairness of fate. Why was the legendary Super Saiyan finally conquered by those bastards like Son Goku, and finally pulled out to let Son Goten and the others level up, and ended up having his blood used to cultivate into a cyborg? However, what Sun Tian didn't know was that after his rebirth, Old Bird specially redesigned Broly and designed a movie in which he fights Sun Bei, the queen of Super God. Sun Tian looked at Broly in front of him, and the shadow in his memory began to overlap slowly. Damn, this guy would not lose his mind here, right? Bardock was unhappy. How could he talk like that? This was the ancestor of the Saiyans, an old ancestor who had reincarnated for nearly 100 generations. Although he didn't know how strong Sun Tian was, he scolded him. Bardock, how dare you talk like that, little brat? This is the ancestor of our Saiyan race, show some respect. Although the father and son have not yet recognized each other, Bardock has already placed himself in the position of an elder. Broly, Bardock, let's keep our separate ways. Your son is no ordinary man. Then he turned to Sun Tian and said, if I am not mistaken, you now have the combat power of a true god, right? Ancestor? It seems there is a story here that I don't know. Sun Tian, yes, he has already broken through to a new realm a year ago. As for whether it is the true god realm you mentioned, I don't know. When Bardock heard this, he thought, good boy, you are worthy of being my son. Although he had predicted that this boy would be very strong, he didn't expect that he would far exceed his imagination. Broly, awesome. You are worthy of being the character who could cry loudly under the suppression of my royal bloodline. You know, when Broly was born, although he didn't recover his memory, he was born with royal blood and was already intelligent. Among the children born with him, only Kakarot was not suppressed by his blood at all. Instead, he burst into tears, which made Broly feel a little threatened. Sun Tian, you are not bad. Among the people in that group except for you, I am afraid that even the adults think that I was scared to tears by you. It is true that Sun Tian's combat power was not high when he was born, but low combat power does not mean that his bloodline is weak. You should know that among all the Saiyans in the demonic martial empire, only Sun Tian and Chi Tian can practice the ancient ape demon art. This is not because Sun Tian is selfish, but because the bloodlines of others cannot reach the first level of practice standard of this technique. Even Wuqian, who had a combat power of 10,000 points when he was born, could not practice it. If Broly's bloodline is the bloodline of the Saiyan royal family, then the bloodline of Sun Tian and Chi Tian is at least as good as the Saiyan royal bloodline. It's just that their bloodline is more hidden, and the effect will only be seen slowly as their strength increases. At this time, Sun Tian turned around and looked at Bardock. This was also a legendary existence. He did not expect that he was still in the world. Sun Tian had thought that if Bardock could live to this day, his combat power would probably be at least Super 3, if not Super 4 or Super 5. Although in my memories of my previous life, there were indeed many fanfictions that set Bardock's combat power to Super 5. Sun Tian, father, I didn't expect you were still alive. If my brother knew about this, he would definitely be shocked. Bardock didn't expect that Sun Tian would actually call them father directly. You know, from their conversation just now, it can be seen that Sun Tian's strength is far beyond his. It can be seen that his son is also an outlier among the Saiyans, but what he did not expect was that his eldest son Raditz was still alive, because when he went back 1,000 years ago, he knew through his predictive ability that his eldest son Raditz went to Earth to cause trouble for his younger son, and finally died at the hands of another Namekian. Bardock, Latitz? Is Latitz still alive? Sun Tian. Of course my eldest brother is still alive. What are you talking about, father? Sun Tian was a little surprised, but it was no wonder. After all, Sun Tian didn't know that Bardock had the ability to predict the future. Although Sun Tian had watched many theatrical versions in his previous life, he had never seen the Bardock chapter. Sun Tian's answer made Bardock at a loss for words. He couldn't possibly say, I discovered through my foresight that you and Latitz were fighting each other, and in the end Latitz died in your hands. Bardock, just live, just live. At this time Sun Tian also realized that these two people were not here to look for the demonic martial empire, or to cause trouble for them. Sun Tian, Father Broly, let's go inside and talk first. Then he pointed at Chi Tian and the other two and introduced them. This is my eldest son, Chi Tian. By the way, I have a name on Earth called Sun Tian. This little guy is called Wu Tian, he is my youngest son, and this is my wife Chi Chi. Chi Chi didn't expect that one of the two people who suddenly appeared was actually her husband's father. Although he is now also a powerful martial artist, he now feels like an ugly daughter-in-law meeting her father-in-law. Sun Tian turned around and took Chi Chi's hand, introducing them. This is my father. I haven't told you before that my father is also very strong. And this one is a Saiyan who was born at the same time as me, Broly. Chi Chi. Hello, father. Hello, Broly. Welcome to our home. Although Bardock had already thought that the young man was his grandson, he was still happy when he heard Sun Tian's introduction. He politely returned the greeting and reached out to take out the angel's heart. Bardock. Okay. I came here in a hurry this time and didn't prepare any gifts. But this angel's heart is pretty good. I'll give it to you for your training. The moment Bardock took out the angel's heart, Sun Tian knew that this was a good thing. Such pure energy was just right for Chi Chi and Goten. Of course it would have little effect on him and Goten. He nodded at Chi Chi. Chi Chi, thank you, father. Goten, why don't you thank Grandpa now? Chi Chi reached out and took the angel's heart in his hand, and immediately felt a pure energy slowly nourishing his body. Little Goten poked his head out from behind Chi Chi, and looked at the man who looked similar to his father. Although he was a little shy, he still said politely, thank you, Grandpa. Today was probably the happiest day for Bardock in thousands of years. First he saw his son, then he heard that his other son was still alive, and then he had two lovely grandsons. Bardock, don't just thank me. This angel's heart was obtained by your grandfather Broly when he killed an angel at the peak of destruction. Broly was sweating profusely. Grandpa Broly? You can't play it like that. Although his previous identity allowed them to call him ancestor, he was only 39 years old in this life. Broly, Bardock, we agreed to keep our own business. Little guy, just call me uncle. I don't know why, but the moment he saw son Goten, Broly actually felt a breath of royal blood from the little guy. Moreover, this little guy's combat power was too high, and this little guy didn't look like he was over 5 years old. Broly, little guy, your name is Goten, right? Come and tell your uncle how old you are this year? Although Wuqian was curious about why the man in front of him asked this, he still replied out of politeness, Uncle, I'm 3 years old. Broly felt dizzy. Although he had reached the peak of destruction power and was even at the level of true god, even he had only a combat power of over 800,000 when he was 3 years old. The little guy in front of him definitely had a combat power of over a million. His talent was too strong. Broly's eyes sparkled as he stared at Goten. Kakarot, I wonder if little Goten will lose his mind when he gets angry? Sun Tianning was puzzled. Why did he suddenly ask this question? No, this little guy has never lost his mind. Oh my god, it's absolutely perfect royal blood. You know, only perfect royal blood can control the mental shock brought by that blood and prevent oneself from losing reason. Even he, although he has royal blood, is not perfect. Otherwise he wouldn't have to go back hundreds of generations to now to effectively control that power. Broly asked again, well that may I ask, does little Goten have a master? Sun Tian finally understood that this guy was definitely impressed by Goten's qualifications and wanted to take him as his disciple. However, although Goten had good qualifications, Sun Tian knew that he was still unable to practice his own skills. It would be better if he could receive instruction from Broly, the legendary master. After all, Goten's terrifying combat power when he was born made Sun Tian think that Goten was also a legendary master. However, Goten never lost his mind later, so Sun Tian did not think about it any further. Sun Tian, not yet. Usually it is Chi-Chi who teaches him. My technique requires too high bloodline, which is not suitable for Wu Tian. Broly, Kakarot, how about letting Goten become my disciple? I'm afraid I'm the only one who knows Goten's physique best. Sun Tian, could it be that Wu Tian also has a super physique? Broly, no, to be precise, Goten's physique is stronger than mine. He actually has perfect royal bloodline. However, Broly did not say that when he advanced to the late stage of destruction, his own imperfect bloodline had been completed and became a complete royal bloodline. Afterwards, Broly briefly talked about some of the history of the Saiyans, especially about their bloodline. It turns out that in ancient times, even if the Saiyans were of ordinary blood, as long as they practiced hard, they could generally transform into Super Saiyans after adulthood. Although their combat power was not very good compared to others, they were actually very strong, and could at least easily kill Frieza in the early stages. Of course, this does not mean that ordinary blood cannot become stronger. I remember that there was a Saiyan with ordinary blood who was able to transform into Super Saiyan 4. You know, from Super Saiyan 3 to Super Saiyan 4, it can be said to be a change in the level of life. And even if it is just the beginning of Super Saiyan 4, it has a combat power of at least 200 billion, which is equivalent to the combat power of the early stage of the destruction limit. If it reaches the limit of Super Saiyan 4, it is completely possible to compete with some pseudo-gods. Above ordinary bloodline, there are bronze bloodline, silver bloodline, and gold bloodline. Ordinary bloodline accounts for more than 95% of Saiyans, and bronze to gold bloodline accounts for about 4%. Above these four bloodlines are the royal bloodline, the imperial bloodline, and the very rare ancestral bloodline. Among the less than 1% of the remaining population, the royal family accounts for more than 99%, the royal bloodline accounts for less than 1%, and the legendary ancestral bloodline has not been heard of by anyone except the ancestor Yamosi. If Broly hadn't revealed this information today, Sun Tian would probably never have thought that there are so many tricks to the Saiyan bloodline. Think about the Saiyans in ancient times. They were no better than dogs. They could easily reach Super Saiyan 2, Super Saiyan 3 and Super Saiyan 4 were not uncommon, and Super Saiyan 5 and Super Saiyan 6 were common. No wonder they dared to challenge the gods. There is a reason for it. After saying this, Broly stared at Sun Tian and said, how about letting little Goten practice with me in the future and I will teach him? Sun Tian, okay, but I have to ask Chi-Chi about this matter. After all, it is Chi-Chi who usually takes care of him. Before Chi-Chi could speak, little Wu Ten stuck his head out and said, if I follow you to practice, will I be able to become as powerful as brother Chi-Ten in the future? It turns out that in Goten's eyes, Chi-Tian is the strongest person except for his father. You know, even Vegeta and Piccolo are not Chi-Tian's opponents now. Broly, of course your uncle is of the strongest royal bloodline, the legendary Super Saiyan, Wuqian, but I feel like you can't beat my brother Kishin yet. Broly was embarrassed. To be honest, in terms of realm, he was higher than Chi-Tian, but now he had not yet recovered to his peak, and his combat power might be comparable to Chi-Tian. It was not certain that he would win. With his realm, he could naturally feel the unfathomable strength in Chi-Tian's body, and his foundation was not too solid. The key was that his royal bloodline could not suppress Chi-Tian. Broly had no choice but to say, "Your brother Chi-Tian is indeed not weaker than me, but his martial arts are not suitable for you, okay?" It's not that Goten really doesn't understand. The 3-year-old Goten already has the thinking of an adult. He has practiced his father's martial arts before, but he simply can't practice it. His blood can't bear it, but his brother Kitchen can. It can be imagined that his brother Kitchen's blood must be stronger. You know, little Goten has a lot of blood to suppress Trunks and the others. Even Trunks, whose normal combat power is several times higher than his when he is not a Super Saiyan, still has a certain suppressing effect on Trunks. When Broly appeared, Goten felt the same blood in Broly, but he was still unwilling to give up. Wuqian, well, as long as you can beat brother Kishin or Tai, I will take you as my master. Chi-Tian was unwilling to do it at this time. Why do you want me to work so hard to become your disciple? Chi-Tian, Goten, stop it. Uncle Broly, don't bother with Goten. This little guy is a devil. Broly, I won't take this too seriously, but Kitchen, how about we have a sparring match? Chi-Tian was speechless. He could feel the violent aura in Broly's body. Although he was not necessarily weaker than Broly, Broly was still his elder, from the same generation as his father. If he lost, it would be fine. But if he won, wouldn't it embarrass the other party? Chi-Tian, no, uncle, you are the same age as my father. How dare Chi-Tian fight with you? If you want to spar, you can go to my father. Broly was speechless. If his fighting power could be improved to his own level, he could compete with Sun Tian. If he competed with Sun Tian now, wouldn't that be asking for trouble? Where would his royal dignity be? Sun Tian came out to rescue him and said, "Okay, Goten, if you want to become stronger, practice with your uncle Broly. Only when you become stronger can you protect your mother." Wooden clenched his fists and said, "Well, I want to become stronger and protect my mother. No one can bully my mother from now on." Broly finally breathed a sigh of relief. Is it easy to have an apprentice? But having such a perfect apprentice, Broly felt that this feeling was very good. Broly, okay, I will definitely teach you all my skills. Bardock, haha, not bad Broly, congratulations. Chi-Chi pulled Goten to the front. Goten, come and meet the master. Wooten, I think calling you uncle is more intimate. Broly laughed. Yes, call me uncle. Everyone laughed. At this time, Sun Tian ordered Chi-Tian to call Latitz. After all, their father was back, and Latitz as the eldest brother should know about it. As for Vegeta and Nappa, they were not on the Magic Saint Star yet, so he was not prepared to notify them for the time being. Chi-Tian tore the space apart and left with a teleportation. Not long after, Chi-Tian reappeared with Latiz's family. Bardock looked at Latiz with moist eyes. After all, he thought Latiz was gone. Although he just heard from Sun Tian that Latiz was still alive, he didn't know that he hadn't let it go until he actually saw it. Raditz looked at the familiar figure in front of him. Chi-Tian had not told him about the situation here before. He just said that his father had something to do and asked their family to come over. Latiz couldn't believe it. Father, is it really you? Bardock, Latiz, it's me, I made you worried. At any moment, Latiz burst into tears and rushed forward to hug Bardock, sobbing. This feeling of reuniting with relatives, especially close relatives, Latiz had not felt this kind of emotion for a long time. The last time he came to Earth was when he thought Sun Tian was murdered, but that time was more violent. At that moment, if Latiz had the ability to destroy a planet, there might not have been any Earth at that time. But this time was different. The father whom he had admired since childhood, the father whom he thought had disappeared with the explosion of planet Vegeta, was actually standing in front of him alive. He was so happy that time. At this moment, Latiz was like a child sobbing while holding Bardock. Compared to Sun Tian, Raditz's feelings for Bardock are obviously much deeper. You have to know that Raditz grew up listening to his father's stories, while Sun Tian himself is a person who was reborn with memories. Not long after Sun Tian was born, his father disappeared along with planet Vegeta. They have only met a few times. The relationship between them is more of a blood relationship. And if it weren't for Bardock, with Raditz's little fighting power, how could he have stayed by Vegeta's side? It was also because Raditz had always followed Vegeta that he was able to escape the destruction of planet Vegeta. Bardock patted Latitz's back. All right, you're already a grown-up and you're still crying. Remember, you weren't like this when you were little. At this time, Latiz slowly loosened his arms around Bardock, as if he had thought of something. He pulled Lashat, the other two, and a blonde woman and introduced them. Father, this is my wife Langqi, and this is my eldest son Lashat, who is years old this year, my second son Nahas, who is years old, and my daughters is Sophia, who just turned. Call me Grandpa now. Langqi is also an outstanding martial artist with a dual personality. She is gentle and amiable when she has blue hair, and extremely violent when she has blonde hair. No one knew why back then, but after meeting Raditz, even the blonde Langqi was conquered by Raditz's masculinity, and finally got together with Raditz. Moreover, Langqi has the resources of the magic and martial arts empire, and she practices seriously, so she is also quite powerful, with a combat power of nearly 100,000. As the eldest son of Raditz, Lashat is not as powerful as Trunks and others, but compared with previous Saiyans, he is much stronger and has a combat power of nearly 1.1 million. However, Nahas's qualifications are better than Lashat. Now Nahas, who is only 10 years old, can already transform into a Super Saiyan. After the transformation, he has a combat power of 100 million and a normal combat power of 2 million. As for Sophia, although she also has a combat power of more than 50,000, she is only 5 years old after all, which is already very strong. The blonde Ranchi had a generous personality and hugged Bardock, while Lashat and the other two respectfully called him Grandpa. Bardock: well, I didn't expect to see you guys get married and start a family 1,000 years later. 1,000 years later? Apart from Broly, only Sun Tian roughly knows what is going on. Raditz: 1,000 years later. Father, what is going on? Although Latitz is very strong now and has a combat power of nearly 1 billion after the transformation, he can feel that his father is stronger than himself. Sun Tian was actually very curious. Although he remembered from his previous life that Bardock should have returned to the past through the time tunnel, he was still not very clear about what happened. Bardock felt everyone's gaze and slowly told his story. Originally, Bardock was just a low-level warrior, but Bardock never believed that low-level warriors were necessarily inferior to those warriors from famous families. During the years ruled by Crowder, Bardock used Crowder and his resources to fight on the front lines again and again, risking his life every time. He originally had only a few hundred combat powers, and he hovered on the brink of life and death again and again. After each recovery, Bardock's combat power would skyrocket. In this way, Bardock, who was originally just a low-level warrior, actually surpassed those so-called mid-level warriors and famous warriors among the Saiyans of the same age. In the end, even King Vegeta was no match for Bardock, and he wrote a legend among the Saiyans. Later, Bardock met and fell in love with Jine, which made Bardock feel a sense of responsibility to protect his people. However, the good times did not last long. After that, Claude retired and was ruled by his son Frieza. Perhaps it was the legend of the Super Saiyan, or it may be that the Saiyans themselves were unruly. Frieza was very dissatisfied with the Saiyans. The tasks he assigned to them became heavier, but the rewards were getting less and less. Moreover, the way he looked at the Saiyans was completely like that of servants. How could the Saiyans at that time bear it? King Vegeta united all the elite warriors on the planet at that time and planned a rebellion, but he seriously underestimated Frieza's fighting power, which led to Frieza making up his mind in advance to destroy the Saiyans. During an invasion of a planet, Bardock accidentally fell into the trap of the natives of the planet and gained the magical ability of foresight, able to see part of the future. At first, Bardock did not take it seriously and thought he was hallucinating. It was not until the birth of Kakarot and a later mission when Bardock's team was killed by Frieza's follower Dodoria that Bardock realized that the scenes he saw might be real. At that time, Bardock's combat power had reached 18,000 and he had learned how to control his energy. Therefore, after killing the alien who killed his team, he was severely injured by Dodoria, whose combat power was 22,000. He restrained his energy, causing Dodoria to believe that Bardock was dead. After Dodoria left, Bardock returned to planet Vegeta with a seriously injured body, wanting to inform his people and expose Frieza's conspiracy. In space, he encountered Kakarot's spaceship that had just been released, which once again confirmed Bardock's predicted scene. Although he knew that this trip would be dangerous, Bardock still did not look back. However, the final result disappointed Bardock greatly. Those tribesmen were addicted to Frieza's charity and led a decadent life, not knowing that Frieza had already begun to prepare to attack them. The angry Bardock had to fight alone against Frieza's army that had arrived at planet Vegeta. Maybe he was too angry. Although Bardock was severely injured, he showed stronger combat power. With nearly 100,000 Bardocks, he killed countless aliens and finally came to the outside of Frieza's spaceship. When Frieza saw that his troops were so weak, and Bardock's fighting power was so astonishing, he became furious and took action himself, firing a planet-destroying bomb, mercilessly destroying both his own troops and Bardock. Bardock used up the last of his strength trying to stop it, but the difference in strength was too great, and ultimately the collision of the two energies opened up a space-time tunnel that is rare once in 1,000 years, and the powerless Bardock was sucked in. When he woke up again, Bardock found himself lying in a room, with a strange-looking alien applying a strange medicine on his body. After talking, they found out that this strange-looking alien was actually a person from the planet Plant who disappeared a long time ago. Unlike the Saiyans, the plant people had no fighting power, and their two eyes were supported by strange tentacles just above their heads. Looking at the sky, Bardock discovered that the sky of this planet was not much different from that of planet Vegeta. Later he realized that planet Vegeta had another name before planet Zyphel, which was planet Plant. It was renamed planet Zyphel several hundred years later, and then it was made the main planet of the Saiyans by the Saiyan warlords who wandered here. In other words, the era that Bardock is living in now is actually 1,000 years ago. Although it is a little hard to believe, Bardock did not think too much about it. According to the Dr. Lipana, it was his son Bailey who found the seriously injured Bardock in the forest and brought him back to the village for treatment. The herb was very magical at the time. After applying it on the wound, Bardock clearly felt that his wound was healing quickly. However, at this time 2 aliens broke into the village and discovered this magical herb. Naturally, they wanted to take it for themselves, which inevitably led to a conflict with the village at that time. Although Bardock was seriously injured, after a battle with Frieza one-sided abuse, he later entered the time and space tunnel and absorbed the power of time and space. His combat power was far beyond the reach of the two aliens. Perhaps remembering his own experience, Bardock took action himself and easily killed the two aliens. After that he was worshipped by little Bailey. However, Bardock did not want to live in the village, so he flew away alone and rested in a cave near the village while recuperating from his injuries. At this time Bardock didn't know that his combat power had far exceeded that of the past. After all, he suddenly found himself in an unfamiliar time and space, and no one would care about his strength. Because Bailey admired the man who saved his village, he insisted on sending food and herbs to Bardock every day, and finally won Bardock's recognition. But they didn't know that a threat was quietly approaching. It turned out that the two aliens were called Dubit and Kabila, and they were subordinates of the then great thief Zeld. Zeld found that the two were actually dead outside. You know, the combat power of these two people is not bad, both of them are nearly, isn't this a slap in Child's face? So Child located the plant planet at that time, and planned to personally take action to get rid of this ignorant guy. The technology at that time had not yet invented equipment that could detect combat effectiveness, so after Child and his companions arrived, they did not find Bardock, but instead came to the village where two of his subordinates were killed. After some inquiries they found out the whole story, and also discovered the value of the herbal medicine in the village. As a space thief, Child naturally would not talk about any deal, but let his subordinates kill all the people in the village. Only Bailey, who had just returned from Bardock, discovered the situation. Thinking of Bardock's previous strength, Bailey returned to the cave and asked Bardock to help them. Bardock was already able to sense the presence of chi at that time, and knew that the opponent's fighting power was extraordinary. Although the village had done him a favor, he did not want to get involved. However, little Bailey's persistence made Bardock think of his past, and he finally decided to take action. When he rushed back to the village, only Bailey's father Lipana was still alive. Bardock killed all of Zilder's subordinates with 3 strikes except for 2. However, when facing Childer, he found that Childer looked not much different from Frieza. In anger, Bardock shouted Frieza's name and fought with Childer, but even though Bardock's strength had greatly increased, he was no match for Childer. Finally, Childs introduced himself, and Bardock was once again convinced that this man who looked like Frieza was a member of Frieza's clan. Thinking that he would die at the hands of Frieza's clan again, thinking of his own people being ruthlessly slaughtered by Frieza, and thinking of what had just happened to little Bailey and the others, Bardock's anger finally broke through the seal of the ancient gods. After that, power continued to surge out of his body, and golden aura was all over his body. Finally, he successfully transformed into a Super Saiyan. After the transformation, Bardock's combat power increased dramatically. Under the control of anger, he defeated Childs and finally sent Childs into space with an energy ball. However, because it was his first transformation, he didn't have very good control over his power. Although Child was seriously injured at the time, he did not die immediately. Instead, he was rescued and brought back to the spaceship by his subordinates. Before he died, he left behind the ancestral motto of being careful of the golden-haired Saiyans. Of course, Bardock didn't know this. After the incident with Zild, Bardock returned to live in the village and continued to practice, eventually fully mastering the Super Saiyan transformation. Afterwards, they boarded the spaceship left behind by Childe and his companions and drifted around in the universe. Finally, they found the Saiyans' ancestral planet Sarada. However, Sarada was also under attack at the time. Although there were some Saiyans with a combat power of over 1 million at the time, it was obvious that the invaders were stronger, and the leader of the invaders was none other than Frieza's clan. When Bardock arrived, there were only a few thousand tribesmen still alive on the planet Sarada, and the core of the planet Sarada had been destroyed, so it was obvious that it could not last long. The angry Bardock killed all the invaders. At that time, Bardock had already fully mastered the power of Super Saiyan 1, and was only 1 step away from Super Saiyan 2. Therefore, the Frieza clan was no match for him. Afterwards, Bardock let the ancestors of the then royal family Vegeta lead the remaining Saiyans to wander in the universe, while he began to investigate Frieza's clan, wanting to completely destroy it. After several years of investigation, Bardock finally found the ancestral planet of the Ice Clan and almost wiped out all of them. However, at this time, he attracted the attention of the great King Kai, who sent powerful men from the underworld to besiege him. Although the strong men of the underworld were very strong at the beginning, after continuous battles, Bardock actually broke through to Super Saiyan 1. Bardock, who reached Super Saiyan 2, was simply not someone the strong men of the underworld could contend with. All the strong men they sent out were beaten back. But later, the underworld actually discovered the Saiyans wandering in the universe, and finally used those Saiyans as a threat, and Bardock was tragically sealed by the great King Kai. It was not until more than 10 days ago that he was discovered by Broly. The seal was broken, and he finally escaped. After listening to Bardock's experience, Sun Tian and Raditz did not expect that their father also had such a painful past. It takes tremendous willpower to withstand a seal of nearly 1,000 years. But no wonder Sun Tian can feel that although his father has not yet broken through to the true God realm, he is not far away. Although his current combat power is not high, he is at the peak of the limit of destruction. Even the current Great Elder of Namek may not be his opponent. Bardock, but fortune and disaster go hand in hand. The 1,000-year seal has eliminated the hidden dangers left over from previous battles. And because I have absorbed the energy of the space-time tunnel, I have made good progress after nearly 1,000 years of enlightenment. The only regret is that I still couldn't prevent the genocide that happened decades ago. In fact, what Bardock didn't know was that it wasn't that he didn't try to stop it. Under the interference of the law of cause and effect, he fell into a coma when he was sealed, and a wisp of his divine consciousness reincarnated into the Bardock of the time, and finally repeated his actions that year, and finally returned to 1,000 years ago, and was finally sealed until now and rescued by Broly. Otherwise, how could two of the same people exist in the same time and space? Broly, okay, now we Saiyans are basically gathered here. When these little guys grow up, our tribe will gradually become stronger. Sun Tian, Father, Broly, what are you going to do next? Are you going to stay in the demonic empire? Broly, this time I mainly came to see you. When my strength recovers a little, I will go to other star regions to see if any of my tribesmen are still alive. Broly briefly recounted what happened to the Saiyans tens of thousands of years ago. Sun Tian and Latitz were shocked. They didn't know these things. They didn't expect that the Saiyans had such a past. Bardock, me too. Ever since I realized the energy of space and time, I can sense that there is more than one space and time in this universe. So I want to wait for some time and go to other space and time to have a look. Sun Tian, indeed, with the technology that our demonic martial empire has mastered, we have already detected that there are 3 parallel time and space in existence, and we have been to 2 of them. Broly was shocked when he heard this. He didn't expect that the technology of the demonic martial empire was so advanced that it could even detect such a taboo. You know, even in ancient times, traveling through time and space was very difficult. Moreover, in the ancient war, all other parallel time and space were wiped out. Unexpectedly, new parallel time and space have emerged now. Bardock closed his eyes and sensed it. There are indeed 2 other time and space. Once I increase my strength to the peak of destruction, I will go and take a look. Sun Tian, Father, why do you want to go to another time and space? Could it be? Bardock, yes, I can feel it. The me in the other 2 time and space should still be alive. If I want to break through to the true God realm, there can only be one me in the 3 time and space. Thinking of this, Bardock suddenly remembered that Sun Tian in front of him was at the level of a true God. Why didn't he merge himself with other time and space? Perhaps knowing what Bardock was thinking, Sun Hui said, I have already cut off the cause and effect with the other 2 time and space, so I am me. But Kakarot in other time and space is not me. Thinking of this, Sun Tian continued, in the other 2 time and space, in one of them, only Vegeta and one descendant are alive. The other Saiyans are dead except for my father's sealed body. In the other time and space, they seem to have some relationship with those King Kais. If my father goes there, I don't mind you looking for them. Broly heard this and said, what? Don't they know that we Saiyans and the gods are mortal enemies? Sun Tian, not necessarily. When I went there last time, I reminded them to be careful, but I'm not sure if they listened. Even in our time and space, we only knew about it due to fate. Broly thought about it and agreed. After all, the Saiyans had experienced countless changes, and there were only a few who knew the ancient truth, so he stopped worrying about it. Latitz was confused as he listened. There were many things that Sun Tian had not told them because of their low level, and what they experienced today made Latitz a little dazed. Fortunately, except for a few adults, the other children went out to play, and only Bardock, Broly, Magneto, Saitama, and Raditz knew about these things. Just then, Kiki came over and said that we could start eating. Broly and Bardock were stunned. You know, after reaching the state of destruction, they don't care much about the need for food, because they can directly absorb energy from the outside world to replenish themselves. Bardock couldn't remember when he last ate, but the 2 of them still got up and went with Sun Tian and the others. In fact, it is the same for Sun Tian and Chi Tian. They often go into seclusion for 10 days or half a month. Now their demand for food is not very strong, and they want to spend more time with their families. However, even though they were well informed, they were still shocked when they saw the food for nearly 1,000 people. Because there were Raditz's family, Bardock and Broly, Chi-Chi had specially prepared a lot more food this time. This is because Sun Tian and his people control an entire empire. If it were other families, they would have to spend all their wealth just on food. After everyone arrived, they started eating immediately. Although Sun Tian and Chi Tian did not have a strong demand for food, it did not mean that they could not eat. On the contrary, they ate more. The originally serious atmosphere was completely destroyed once everyone started eating. Even Broly and Bardock quickly joined the fight for food. After the meal, Raditz was about to go back, but Bardock asked them to stay. The main reason was that Raditz and the others were too weak, and Bardock planned to train them well. Broly took Goten to enhance their relationship, and he cared very much about this disciple. 2 days passed in a blink of an eye. During these 2 days, Broly basically became the babysitter of the Sun Tian family. He practiced with Goten every day, and taught Goten some related practice methods of Chuan Chao. Bardock took Latitz and his son for training. Fortunately, the magic martial empire was fully equipped with various practice equipment, and it was assisted by the spiritual time world of the original heaven. 2 days was equivalent to 2 years in the outside world. Some of the things that should be taught had been taught to them, and the rest was for them to understand and adapt themselves. However, after 2 days, actually 2 years because they are in the spiritual time world of training, both Goten and Raditz have undergone qualitative changes. Goten, who is only 3 years old now, his age in the spiritual time realm is not included, has a normal combat power of nearly 100 million. If his transformation due to his royal bloodline is added, it is a full 10 billion combat power, which is really unimaginable. And after Bardock's guidance, Raditz's combat power has also changed significantly. His original normal combat power was only more than 5 million, but it has increased nearly 5 times to 25 million. Although the increase after transforming into a Super Saiyan is not as terrible as Goten, it is also increased by nearly 60 times. A combat power of 1.5 billion is something Raditz had never thought of before. The strength of Raditz's 3 children has also been significantly improved. The 14-year-old Lashat's normal combat power has increased to 7.5 million, and she has naturally learned the transformation into a Super Saiyan. After the transformation, her combat power has reached 450 million. Compared with Lashat, the 10-year-old Nahas is stronger. His normal combat power has reached 18 million, and his combat power after the transformation is 1.08 billion. However, the 5-year-old Zisofia is much worse, probably because she is a girl. She has not learned to transform into a Super Saiyan, but her combat power has increased several times, reaching nearly 1 million. Broly and Bardock did not meet other people from the demonic empire, but they heard from Sun Tian that the demonic empire is indeed very strong nowadays. Even in addition to the people here, there are still many people with combat power exceeding 10 billion, such as the Great Elder of Namek with a combat power of 80 billion, the Great Demon King Piccolo with a combat power of 38 billion, Vegeta has a combat power of 18 billion once he transforms, Slug has a combat power of 12 billion, and there are many others with combat power over 1 billion, such as Niru and the combined combat power during the Namek crisis. As for those with hundreds of millions, there are even more. It can be said that the demonic empire nowadays is completely a crab in the Milky Way, walking sideways. The time they spend together is always short, and after imparting all the knowledge he wanted to impart to Goten, Broly was finally ready to leave the Milky Way to look for those clansmen who had retreated to other star regions. After instructing Goten to practice well and not to bring shame to their royal bloodline, he said goodbye to everyone and embarked on his own journey. A day later, Bardock also bid farewell to his 2 sons. Under the gaze of everyone, he directly broke through the barrier of time and space and entered other parallel time and space. 5 days later, Vegeta and Piccolo returned from the expedition. When they learned of the existence of Broly and Bardock, they were really shocked. They didn't expect that in addition to Sun Tian and Chi Tian, there were actually 2 such great gods in the galaxy. Today the magic martial empire is unrivaled in the Milky Way. Most of the other forces have surrendered and merged into the territory of the magic martial empire. However, there are so many life planets in the Milky Way that even the magic martial empire only controls some important planets, and the entire Milky Way is basically connected through the interstellar teleportation array. As for some planets that have not yet developed space civilization, they are generally not taken care of unless they are of special value. To this day, the demonic martial empire has confirmed its dominant position in the Milky Way, and no force can shake it. Even the underworld would not dare to provoke it without the help of the gods. The demonic martial Saint Star has replaced the original center of the Milky Way and become the political center of the entire galaxy, with countless spaceships traveling back and forth every day. 10 days later, the magic martial empire announced the development of a planet with interstellar civilization in the entire Milky Way. 1 month later, a founding ceremony was held on the magic martial Holy Star, formally establishing the magic martial empire's dominance over the Milky Way. Time flies, and the news from the magic martial empire has caused an uproar in the entire Milky Way. Some hidden forces are dissatisfied, but the magic martial empire directly stated that those who are dissatisfied can come to the magic martial Holy Star to challenge at any time. And the magic martial empire can choose any of the top 9 in the combat power ranking. When the magic martial empire's combat power rankings were made public, those voices of dissatisfaction suddenly disappeared, mainly because it was too terrifying. However, those forces that had joined the magic martial empire were immediately excited. They originally thought that the magic martial empire's high-end combat power was only Piccolo and Vegeta, but they did not expect that what was shown was only the tip of the iceberg. The magic and martial empire's combat power rankings include the top 1,000 strongest warriors in the magic and martial empire. Ranking number 1, Sun Tian's combat power is unknown, and it is estimated that his combat power exceeds 500 billion. Ranked 2nd, Sun Qichen's combat power is unknown, and it is estimated that his combat power exceeds 200 billion. Ranked 3rd, Khazar Grand Elder of Namek with a combat power of 85 billion. Ranked 4th, Big O, formerly Big O Star, with a combat power of 82 billion, not counting Big O Star's mechanical army. Ranked 5th, Zilu, with a combat power of billion. Ranked 6th, Piccolo, founder of the Magic Empire, with a combat power of 40 billion. Ranked 7th, Vegeta's combat power is 22 billion. Ranked 8th, Sligo's combat power is 13.8 billion. Ranked 9th, Sun Wuqian's combat power is 11.8 billion. None of the top 9 has a combat power lower than 10 billion. Even Craig, one of the first batch of students in the Magic and Martial Holy Land, who is ranked 1000, has a combat power of 800,000. You have to know how terrifying it is to have a combat power of 800,000 in the universe. Think about Feliza's Jinyu Force and Kavira's Mecha Force, whose strongest had a combat power of only 300,000 or so, which already made people in the universe shudder. In the Magic and Martial Empire, there are only about 1,000 Craigs with a combat power of 800,000. In the Magic and Martial Empire, there are definitely more than 100,000 people with a combat power of more than 100,000. You have to know that the Magic and Martial Empire has put a lot of effort into cultivating scientific and technological talents and martial artists. When those newly joined forces found out that if they performed well enough, they could enter the Magic and Martial Arts Royal Academy for further studies, they were so happy that they didn't know how to react. The founding ceremony of the demonic martial empire went very smoothly. Under the military intimidation of Piccolo, Vegeta, Slug, and others, other forces from the Milky Way star region all recognized the demonic martial empire's dominance in the Milky Way. Following the research of a number of think tanks, the demonic martial empire issued a series of codes, which included a series of regulations and unified standards for all industries. Of course, these are not the responsibility of Bick and his team. Naturally, there are people below who will carry out and discuss them. At this point, all planets in the entire Milky Way that have developed interstellar civilizations are basically directly or indirectly ruled by the Magic Empire. This is probably the most correct investment for the great Demon King Piccolo. Piccolo's goal was just to rule the Earth. At this point, all planets in the entire Milky Way that have developed interstellar civilizations are basically directly or indirectly ruled by the Magic Empire. This is probably the most correct investment for the great Demon King Piccolo. Piccolo's goal was just to rule the Earth, but now the entire Milky Way is under the rule of the Magic Empire. With the unification of the Milky Way, the divine power in the underworld was directly impacted. The rules of heaven and earth directly deprived the Grand King Kai and the 4 King Kais of their authority. The 5 King Kais were directly driven back to the divine realm. The Grand King Kai planet and the 4 King Kai planets were also directly separated from the underworld. Those martial artists in the underworld who should have been reincarnated early were directly forced into reincarnation without the interference of the King Kai's authority. The underworld is a very peculiar existence. Originally, the underworld had its own rules. However, under the interference of the angels and the World Core clan, these world kings divided the authority that originally belonged to King Yama, so that King Yama became a decoration in the underworld. For example, those martial artists from the human world were supposed to be reincarnated after death according to the rules, but under the interference of the world kings, they were granted flesh bodies and continued to practice in the underworld, becoming tools for the world kings to manage the lower world. King Yama's authority was greatly weakened, and he was even inferior to those psychics who could communicate between the yin and yang worlds. When the authority of King Kai was stripped away by the rules of heaven and earth, King Yama, who had been working like an ox or a horse, suddenly underwent a drastic change. A terrifying aura far surpassing that of the previous King Kai of the underworld awakened from King Yama's body. All the ghosts in the underworld were forced to prostrate themselves on the ground due to the pressure of this aura, looking at the King of Hell in horror, who usually looked cheerful but was actually suffering. They had no idea what had happened. After an unknown amount of time, King Yama finally calmed down, opened his eyes, and a gleam of light flashed. God Clan, you actually dared to interfere with the authority of reincarnation. Your sin is unforgivable. King Yama's sudden outburst of rage frightened the ghosts in the underworld, and they were at a loss as to what to do. They had no idea why King Yama was so angry, and they didn't dare to step forward to ask. In hell, the 2 demon messengers, Red and Blue, who were originally imprisoned by Frieza and others who were sent to hell for serious crimes, also changed. Although the aura they exuded was not as terrifying as that of King Yama, it was far greater than that of Frieza and others. The red and blue ghosts roared loudly, and the cell where they were imprisoned was directly destroyed. Frieza, Kfir, and the others thought they could still act powerful, but they were knocked to the ground by the 2 ghosts in their maces and thrown directly into the Needle Mountain blood pool. Then the 2 ghosts went straight to the Yama Hall without looking back. In the Yama Hall, King Yama has recovered and asked the surrounding ghosts to leave the hall and maintain order in the underworld. Not long after, the red and blue ghosts appeared in the Yama Hall. Red ghost, blue ghost, are you awake too? The red and blue ghosts approached and looked at the Yama King in front of them, half kneeling. My lord, what is going on? King Yama, don't be so polite, get up. Speaking of which, we haven't met formally since the destruction of the ancient reincarnation world, right? The red and blue ghosts, I am ashamed. King Yama, I can't blame you. After all, even I have suffered from their tricks and have been their puppet for so many years. The underworld was not originally under the jurisdiction of the gods, or rather the underworld was originally an independent system. After a person dies, as long as their souls are not scattered, they will inevitably go to the underworld. The underworld will then judge based on their merits. They will either go to hell to suffer and be reincarnated after their sins are washed away, or they will directly become ghosts in the underworld and wait for reincarnation, or they will be reincarnated directly. However, because the king of the gods broke through the boundaries and obtained some of the authority of heaven, he forcefully placed the gods in the underworld and divided the power of the king of hell. As a result, the power of the underworld was abused by the gods. According to their wishes, they either ascended to the so-called heaven, or gave their bodies back to imprison their souls to practice in the underworld and become the gods' thugs, or directly interfered with the affairs of the world. The Yama king and the ghost messengers in the underworld were also sealed of their minds, and became puppets at the mercy of the gods. Otherwise, how could the Yama king of the underworld handle those complicated official duties every day? The two red and blue ghosts said, "Thank you, Lord Yama, for your generosity, but what should we do next? The original underworld system has been messed up. Yama, let's first let those so-called gods in the human world go back to the underworld. The human world has its own rules. Why are these gods staying in the human world? Let them all get out of here." The red and blue ghosts. "Okay, let's do it now." King Yama had already regained control of the underworld at this time. Naturally, he knew that the reason he was able to regain control of the underworld was because a major change had occurred in the human world, which had seriously affected the rule of the underworld gods. The heavenly Tao seized the opportunity and drove the gods back. Using the authority of the underworld, King Yama observed the developments in the human world and soon found the cause. In the holy world of demon and martial arts, Sun Tian was fighting against Qi Tian and Wu Tian when he suddenly felt a divine power sweeping over him. Although this divine power was not as strong as his, it was not much weaker either. Who could it be in the early stage of true God? Sun Tian thought to himself, and the next moment, a voice sounded in Sun Tian's mind. "The strong men in the world, it turns out that it was because of you. This time I owe you a favor." Sun Tian, who are you, or which true God are you? Yama King, I am Yama King who rules the underworld. Yama King, early stage of true God? Are you sure you are not kidding me? Sun Tian thought about the middle-aged uncle in his memory, who stamped stamps all day long and occasionally laughed. This style of painting seemed a little wrong. Perhaps knowing that Sun Tian didn't believe it, a vortex suddenly appeared slowly in the sky above the demonic martial saint realm. How about a strong man from the human world come to the underworld to have a chat? Sun Tian cursed in his heart. Suddenly someone asked him to come to the underworld to chat? Why did it sound a bit weird? Was he cursing him to die early? Although he didn't know why King Yama invited him, Sun Tian was somewhat interested in the legendary underworld and didn't refuse. After instructing Qi Tian and Wu Tian to keep an eye on the house, Sun Tian jumped and stepped directly into the underworld through the vortex in the sky. It was not because Sun Tian was arrogant, but because Sun Tian could feel that King Yama actually had no ill intentions. The environment in the underworld is not as gloomy and terrifying as imagined. With a quick glance, Sun Tian already had a rough understanding in his mind. Although it is not as big as the Milky Way, the underworld is not small either. It is about 1/10,000th the size of the Milky Way. However, the space in the underworld is more stable, not as fragile as the human world. A small character with a combat power of tens of thousands can easily destroy a planet. In the underworld, it is probably impossible to destroy a planet without hundreds of millions of combat forces. Moreover, the underworld does not exist in the form of a starry sky. The Kinkai planet in the memory of the previous life was not found, let alone the so-called Great Kinkai planet. As for those underworld martial artists who had caused minor troubles to the demonic martial empire before, not a single one was found. But strangely, Sun Tian found snake paths floating in the air. There were 4 snake paths in the 4 directions of southeast, northwest, northeast, and southwest, almost filling the entire underworld. From time to time, ghost-like creatures moved slowly on the snake paths. Occasionally there were some creatures with physical bodies, but most of them seemed to have no consciousness and walked slowly along the snake paths towards the center of the underworld. There were thick layers of golden clouds on both sides of the snake paths. In addition, Sun Tian also found that there was a palace in each snake path. Although the aura of the owner of the palace was nothing compared to him, it was also very scary, even inferior to the former Friscavella. The end of the 4 snake paths was not what was remembered in the previous life, but an entire continent floating in the air. The area of the entire continent was about 100 times the size of the demon martial Saint Star. However, in some places, even Sun Tian had no way to peek into the gods, as if there was an invisible force blocking Sun Tian's spiritual consciousness. Just as Sun Tian was about to head for the floating continent, King Yama had already come in front of Sun Tian in person. His nearly 9-meter height and faint divine might were completely different from the King Yama in Sun Tian's memory. However, the double horns on the head, the burly body, and the image reminded Sun Tian of someone. That is his father-in-law, Bull Demon King. It can be said that Bull Demon King is a smaller version of Yama King. Sun Tian thought with amusement. Do all people with the word Demon King in their names have horns on their heads? Thinking of this, Sun Tian couldn't help but take another look at the horns of Yama King. King Yama, what's the matter, strong human? Is there something wrong with me? Sun Tian, you are Yama King? It's nothing, I just thought of something. King Yama, oh, what's the matter? Could it be related to me? Sun Tian was speechless. He couldn't say out loud what he felt. After laughing, Sun Tian turned serious and said, I don't know what King Yama wants to do by inviting me here. Is he trying to suppress me? King Yama, suppression, where do you get the idea from? But then he thought about it and knew that it must be Sun Tian who classified him as part of King Kai's group. King Yan, you don't think I'm an accomplice of King Kai and his gang, do you? Sun Tian, isn't it? By the way, I just checked and it seems that I didn't find King Kai or anything. What's going on? King Yama, this story started a long time ago, but this time it was your demonic empire that helped us, otherwise I would still be living like a puppet. Sun Tian, oh, what do you mean? King Yama looked around and said, the guest follows the host's wishes. Let's go to another place to talk in detail. Sun Tian also felt that this was not the place to discuss matters, so he nodded. King Yama led the way, and soon the two arrived at a palace. Yama King, I am King Yanju. If you don't mind, I will be so generous as to call you brother son, how about that? Although he did not know why King Yama had such an attitude towards him, but when he thought of King Yama's realm of the early stage of true God, although his current strength might only be at the destruction level, he was definitely older than him. Sun Tian, brother Yanju, you are too polite. To be honest, I didn't expect there is a master like you in the underworld, because the strongest person sent by the underworld before was no more than 15 billion strong men in the middle stage of destruction. But the energy in the body of the king of Yama in front of him definitely exceeded 50 billion, and his realm had actually reached the realm of true God. King Yama, no matter how strong we are still sealed from the gods above the true gods and become their puppets. If we were not protected by the rules of heaven and earth, I'm afraid we would be dead. Well, there is an inside story. Is there any gossip here that I don't know? King Yan continued. Speaking of which, it is thanks to you that I was able to wake up again this time. If you hadn't established a super empire spanning the stars in the human world, greatly weakening the power of King Kai and his men, causing the rules of heaven and earth to notice and drive them all away, I'm afraid I really don't know how long I would have been confused. Sun Tian, rules of heaven and earth? Although Sun Tian has reached the true God realm, he has seldom dealt with other true gods. Even Broly, whom he met not long ago, has recently upgraded his realm to the true God realm. Therefore, he is not very clear about some secrets in the universe. King Yama, yes, the rules of heaven and earth. As if seeing Sun Tian's confusion, King Yama knew that the person in front of him must have recently broken through to the true God realm and was not very clear about many secrets of the universe. King Yama asked back, Brother Sun, what do you think the world we live in is made of? Sun Tianing was puzzled. Isn't it composed of the underworld, the human world, and the divine world? Could it be that the former North King was lying to me? Sun Tian told the King of Hell what the King of the North Realm had said before about the composition of the universe. And the King of Hell did not know whether to laugh or cry after hearing it. Strictly speaking, what King Kai said was not wrong. After all, King Kai and his people were only a subsidiary race of the core tribe, and what they knew was quite limited. Following King Yama's lecture, Sun Tian Kai finally truly understood the composition of this world. The entire world is made up of countless cosmic spaces. Originally there were 18 universes in the world, but in an ancient war, 6 of the universes were completely destroyed in that war. Now there are still 12 universes in the world. Above the 12 universes is the legendary True God Realm. Strictly speaking, the True God Realm is also equivalent to a universe, but the space in the True God Realm is more stable. Even the strong ones in the True God Realm can hardly exert the ability to destroy planets in the True God Realm like they are in the universe now. In addition to these, there are some independent existences, such as the legendary True Demon Realm. For example, due to certain reasons, a parallel space-time world is generated. In fact, the parallel space-time world only covers a star field at most. It is not as Sun Tian and others imagine that the entire universe will be regenerated because of a slight change. Let's put it this way. The parallel space-time world is more like a mirror world or a copy world of the real world, which exists based on reality. A parallel world of time and space is difficult to create unless it is approved by the rules of heaven and earth. For example, because of Sun Tian's time travel, the future of the entire Milky Way star field will inevitably change. Therefore, under the influence of the rules of heaven and earth, a mirror world without Sun Tian's time travel is generated. For example, the parallel world where Sun Wukong is located would have died because of Sun Wukong's heart disease, but Sun Wukong happens to be the son of destiny of the entire Milky Way star field. So a mirror world of the future Trunks is differentiated again. In fact, it is impossible to really say which parallel space-time is the real world. It is only relatively speaking. For Sun Tian, Sun Wukong's spacetime and future Dat spacetime are both mirror worlds, or copy worlds. Similarly for future Dat spacetime and Sun Wukong spacetime, the other two spacetimes are also mirror worlds, which is equivalent to three parallel spacetimes coexisting, interconnected, and also influencing each other. Apart from these, there is a relatively special existence, that is the underworld, or the world of samsara. The world of samsara was originally a whole. In fact, the lord of the world of samsara is none other than King Yama. King Yama's original strength level is actually the same as that of the ancestors of the Saiyans and Namekians in ancient times, as well as the current king of angels and the king of the world core tribe. They are all powerful beings with a limit of true gods. Of course, although they are all extremely powerful true gods, there are still differences in their combat power. For example, the king of angels, the king of the core tribe, and the ancestor of the Saiyans are definitely in the first sequence, and the ancestor of the Namekians and King Yama are not much different. However, in an ancient battle the king of angels broke through the level of true god and killed all the ancestors of the Saiyans and Namekians, except the king of the Kai core clan who was his ally, and then killed the neutral King Yama and finally broke the entire Samsara world into pieces, forming small underworlds. Later, he sent the Kai King clan, a subordinate race of the Kai core clan, to control the authority of the underworld and monitor the entire human universe. Their purpose was naturally to fear that the Saiyans and Namekians would make a comeback. As the lord of a world, although King Yama was killed by the sudden appearance of the king of angels, his soul had already been connected to the world of reincarnation, so he would not be easily wiped out. After the cycle of reincarnation was divided into countless small underworlds, King Yama's soul was also divided and reincarnated into the star fields controlled by the small underworlds. However, at this time, the authority of the entire small underworld had been controlled by King Kai, and King Yama had not recovered his memory at all. However, relying on his familiarity with the cycle of reincarnation, he was resealed by King Kai and appointed as King Yama of the underworld, living a life like a puppet. However, now because of the power of Sun Tian and others in the human world, the authority of the king of the small underworld has been directly affected, so that the rules of heaven and earth discovered the problem and restored the memory of King Yama in one fell swoop, and at the same time King Yama's strength and realm have been rapidly improved. However, the current King Yama is not the complete King Yama after all, but just one of the reincarnations of the former Lord of Reincarnation. But because it is the first reincarnation to be awakened, his realm was directly restored to the early stage of true God with the gift of the laws of heaven and earth. However, the energy in his body has only barely recovered to the middle stage of destruction. After all, no matter how strong it is, King Yama's current body cannot bear it. After hearing this, Sun Tian understood a little bit. Why did he feel that the King Yama in front of him had the realm of a true god but only had the strength of a mid-stage destruction? He thought that he would be like the King Kai in his past life's memory, with only the realm but no corresponding combat power. He didn't expect that the fundamental reason was that the physical body of the King Yama in front of him was not good enough. Sun Tian, I never thought that this world would be like this. So what are you going to do next, Brother Yan? Restore the Samsara world? Awaken those other reincarnated bodies? King Yama, for the time being, manage this small underworld. As for the other small underworlds, we will deal with them later. The most urgent thing is to improve my strength. Otherwise, with my current strength, it will be easy for the angels to find me. Sun Tian. Yes, by the way, you haven't replied to me yet. Why did I find that King Kai's planet disappeared, and the powerful people in the underworld also disappeared? King Yama, Kaio planet, having lost the authority over the underworld, has naturally returned to the divine world. As for those strong men who practiced with their physical bodies, why would they keep their physical bodies after they die? Naturally, they have all returned to reincarnation. Sun Tian, reincarnation? If so, where will they be reincarnated? The Milky Way or the entire seventh universe is possible. King Yama, if it was the complete reincarnation world in the past, they would be reincarnated into different universes, or they might be directly reincarnated into the true God realm, or the true demon realm. But now they can only be reincarnated into the Milky Way star region. By the way, the soul strengths of these people are very high. If they are reincarnated, their cultivation will be very smooth. Not to mention reaching the heights in the underworld, but it is definitely not something that ordinary people can compare to. Sun Tian. Oh, so a large number of geniuses will emerge in our demonic martial empire next? As if he had thought of something, Sun Tian said, the true God realm that Brother Yan just mentioned should not be the same place as the God realm, right? King Yama, of course not. The true God realm is a space of the same level as the Samsara realm, and the God realm is just a high-level space within the universe. With the introduction of King Yama, Sun Tian's view of the Dragon Ball world was refreshed again. In fact, calling this world the Dragon Ball world is just the result of Sun Tian's memories of his previous life. In fact, this world is not called the Dragon Ball world. After all, except for the 6th and 7th universes, there are no so-called Dragon Balls in other universes, including the true God realm, the true demon realm, and the Samsara realm that has turned into countless small underworlds. According to the King of Hell, In this world, even if the true God world, the true demon world, and the 12 existing universes are added together, they actually only occupy 1 to 2% of the world. In the world there is more void space. The void space is filled with dangers. Even a strong man at the peak of the true God level has to be careful after entering. If he encounters a void storm, he will lose his life. If one wants to explore the endless void space, one must have at least the ultimate cultivation of a true God. It is rumored that the void beasts in the void space can hold their own even against the strongest beings at the level of true gods. Some void beasts even have their own internal universes, in which there are also countless living creatures. Of course, even in the endless void of space, there are very few beings above the true gods. Sun Tian's 3 views were refreshed again. He suddenly felt that he, a master in the early stage of true God, was just like a newbie, whose understanding of this world was still in preschool. Sun Tian suddenly had the idea that the world is so big and he wanted to go out for a walk. Back to the point, Sun Tian suddenly thought of another thing, that is, how did the universe that still exists come from? Was it really created by the King of the Worlds? Sun Tian threw out Ninghuo, and the King of Hell suddenly felt a little regretful for letting Sun Tian come to chat. It turned out that this kid didn't know anything at all. What are you thinking? With the strongest combat power of the Kaioshin, which is at the mid-stage of destruction creating the universe? Sun Tian was scolded so much that he didn't know what to say. Actually, if King Kai really had the ability to create the universe, would he be so scared by Boo in the late stage of destruction? Sun Tian cursed himself for being so stupid. Why did he always like to bring in things from his past life? He didn't even think about it. After being reborn into this world, apart from some similarities at the beginning, weren't there enough revelations later? After King Yama's explanation, Sun Tian also had an intuitive understanding of the current universe. The structure of the human world is generally not much different. It is composed of individual celestial bodies as basic elements, forming small star systems, medium-sized star systems, and large star systems. Many star systems then form larger star fields, such as the Milky Way where Sun Tian and his companions are now. A universe is made up of countless star fields. As for the divine realm within the universe, it is actually a space with a higher energy level and a more stable spatial structure. Compared to low-level star fields like the Milky Way, a person with tens of thousands of combat power can easily destroy a planet. In the divine realm, that planet cannot easily withstand the impact of hundreds of millions of combat power. Even some planets in it can withstand the impact of true God-level combat power. However, it is unknown who created this universe, or whether it was a natural evolution under the rules of heaven and earth. But one thing is certain, even if it is a true God, it is impossible to create a universe. Even the limit of a true God is not enough. Sun Tian thought of his inner world. With the continuous improvement of his cultivation over the years, it has been growing. Now it is almost as big as the entire Mowu galaxy. Although there is only a continent in the inner world and it does not exist in the form of a planet, it is precisely because of this that the space of Sun Tian's inner world is very stable. Even the impact of the middle stage of the destruction level can hardly shake the space of the inner world. King Yama paused. Although the true God cannot create the universe, it is possible to destroy it. However, no true God dares to do so because they cannot withstand the backlash of the rules of heaven and earth. But if you can break through to above the true God, that may not be the case. Back then, after the King of Angels broke through, even the high-level universe like the Samsara realm was shattered into countless small underworlds, not to mention the universes that were countless levels lower than the Samsara realm. As far as the King of Hell knows, after the 5th angel made a breakthrough, the 6 universes controlled by the Saiyans and Namekians were directly reverted to nothingness by just a thought from the King of Angels. In the ancient battle, if a terrifying beast greater than a true god had not suddenly appeared from the void and fought the King of the Angels to a draw, I'm afraid that you Saiyans and Namekians would have disappeared in the long river of history. It was because of that terrifying giant beast that King Yama had the opportunity to split his soul into each small underworld and barely escaped. However, when he thinks about it now, even he who is at the level of a true god is scared half to death by that terrifying force. And that was because the giant beast itself was seriously injured. Otherwise, it would not be a lose-lose situation, but the King of Angels would have died directly. When Sun Tian heard this, he roughly knew who the giant beast King Yama was talking about. He knew it must be the dragon ancestor who had just come into this world. He silently gave a thumbs up to the dragon in his heart. In fact, in ancient times, after reaching the peak of destruction, one could penetrate the barriers of the universe and go to another universe. However, after the King of Angels destroyed 6 universes, the barriers between universes were strengthened. Now, only when one reaches the limit of destruction can the barriers of the universe be penetrated. But how many people in a universe can truly reach the realm of destruction? Moreover, although the void space between universes is not as terrifying as the real void space, it is also very dangerous. Therefore, generally speaking, it is rare for people from 2 universes to collide with each other. With Sun Tian's current strength, it would be easy for him to go to other universes. If there were no new true god-level powerhouses in the demonic martial empire except him, Sun Tian would probably have begun to prepare to go to other universes to broaden his horizons. Of course, the True God Realm had no idea for the time being. Since the Ancient War, the True God Realm had basically become the base camp of the Angels and the World Core clan. If he, a scion, ran there, with his cultivation level at the early stage of the True God, the horror would be that he would be walking into a trap,